Welcome to Echoes of the Old Ways, a journey back through ancient paths and timeless wisdom. In each episode, we gather to honor the voices of pagan elders who guide us with stories and wisdom passed down through centuries. We walk in the footsteps of those who came before us, drawing on their strength and insight. Together, we explore sacred rituals, celebrate life cycles, and reconnect with the wisdom of the earth. Each episode opens a door to ancient practices and beliefs that remind us of our place in the natural world. We call upon the spirit of our ancestors, those who nurtured and guided, whose voices resonate across time, and whose wisdom lives on within us and the land. Through Echoes of the Old Ways, we invite you to reconnect with ancient knowledge, with nature's rhythms, and with the deep wisdom shared among the earth and her children. Join us, your hosts, as we rekindle the flame of tradition, nurturing the bond between the earth and her children. Welcome to Echoes of the Old Ways. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Echoes of the Old Ways. This is Jim.
And this is Davron.
And I'm Gwen.
How are you doing tonight, everybody?
Fantastic. How are you?
Good.
Gwen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty okay. I have to do a shout out to my good friend the Murphy because she helped me find my ground again. It's been a little shaky.
Well, good. It's that time of year, though, and things are a little
I think
astrologically disrupted, but we're coming back into a good time, and hopefully things will, on all planes, be soothing over and help with some of that.
You bottling and selling that stuff, Dav?
I do. No guarantees, not FDA approved or anything, but I'll send you a bottle.
Thank you, darling.
Well, we have an exciting night tonight, Jim. Why don't you tell us about it?
We do. So Gwendolyn had reached out to Oberon Zell and was able to get him for our special guest tonight. And I'm super excited to talk about, all the great things that he has done in the past, but as well as what he is up to presently, and trying to circle the wagons in our community and push back against the powers that be and, try to keep ours safe. And by ours, I mean all of Gaia's children, but specifically those who find themselves on that path. But I'm grateful to Gwen to reaching out to him, but also to Oberon for agreeing to be on tonight. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. I have to apologize, gents, for the lack of lighting in here tonight. I'm sorry. I look like I'm through a glass darkly, don't I?
It looks very moody and mysterious.
Well, honey, I'm missing the bar rail.
You look like you're in a little cottage somewhere. There's a hearth behind you. That's what I'm picturing anyway. I don't know, but
thank you, darling. Thank you.
Plus, I know there's racks of bottles behind you. It looks very witchy automatically.
So, well, again, I'm very excited to bring on Oberon and talk about, of course, what he's been up to, but kind of tie that into current events and work together to unite our community. But really the purpose of Echoes of the Old Ways is to preserve that wisdom of our elders and connect them with the
The
ones
modern
who are,
age.
yes, the ones who are growing up now, and make sure that they stay connected to that
Whip them
wisdom.
into shape. Make sure our legends and myths and knowledge is not forgotten.
Some digital chapters
Right.
with one of the loveliest tonight.
So without further ado, we will introduce Oberon Zell. Hello and welcome. Hello, Oberon. Hello, Oberon.
Can you hear us?
There's a bit of a lack.
I can now.
There he is.
I
I think there's a slight
haven't heard
delay.
anything up until now, though.
Okay.
Well, good.
So, of course, Oberon, thank you for being with us tonight. How are you doing? If there is ever so slight delay, it may be that snow that is falling around.
Well,
Hey, Oberon, can you hear us?
So, Oberon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to lately? Yep, we are having some connectivity issues, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It was working fine a minute ago before the intro.
apparently, yes,
Yeah.
it was. I'm just hearing
Well, why don't you just go ahead
Little
and tell
bits
us
and pieces of what you're saying, not the whole thing.
Yeah.
And images
Yeah,
freezing.
I believe the weather,
Yep.
the weather all around us can certainly be affecting that. Oberon, so we don't keep with the delay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and your identity as a pagan?
I think somebody should send for Mercury.
Yes. I'm going to try to, let's see.
Maybe. Oberon, can you hear us at all?
I'm just not
Okay. Well, we can hear you. If you
hearing
hear
anything.
me, if you want to just tell us about your journey.
All right, I see that. That's good. Posting a little chat note. I can do that. If you can hear me, sing one, because I've been doing this for like over 60 years now. You know, it goes back quite a ways. I think my journey really began as a child when I first started reading, and the very first reading that I did was children's versions of Greek mythology. So I kind of cut my teeth during the 50s when I was in high school. And I was in high school during that 50s when it's all the classic high school in the 50s. We seem to have gotten stuck there. Well, I was there, and I started college in the 60s. And during the 50s, I was an avid reader of Robert Heinlein's science fiction juveniles. And he put out a new one every year. And I was like the librarian would save them for me. I always got them first because, I always had an affection for librarians. My first crushes, I think. And the year I started college, the series kind of culminated in a book called Stranger in a Strange Land, which really resonated at that time, 1961. It was exactly the right thing for that moment, because every 60 years, like clockwork, there is a cultural renaissance, and it usually begins with some kind of dramatic thing. This time, it began with the COVID epidemic, but the last one, it began with the invention of the birth control pill, which changed everything. In any case, Stranger in a Strange Land changed my life, and in the story, it lays the foundation for all kinds of things we think of as pagan today. I mean, particularly in the area of religion and mysticism, magic, all that. And in the story, a church is created, the Church of All Worlds, they call it. And it's got priestesses and sex and ritual nudity and all kinds of good stuff. Central ritual is sharing of water. And that's kind of the commitment you make with each other. So on April 7th, 1962, I shared water with my first water brother, Lance Christie. And we began the journey that became the Church of All Worlds. And for a while, it was kind of a secret society, a little water brotherhood. We were in college, and we would read the book, and we would find somebody else we thought was pretty cool, and we'd hand them the book, and if they liked it and they felt really resonated, we'd say, well, glad you like it. By the time we graduated in 65. And then we debated, should we keep this a kind of a secret society? Because by now we were all off to graduate school and other postgraduate lives. Or should we make this public? Society, and Lance kind of headed that up. It was initially named
Son of a bee,
as well as the esoteric meaning of the ancient lost homeland of our ancestors, and we thought that was kind of cool. So that's what we call ourselves. Atlans became the Association for the Tree of Life, and Lance continued heading it up throughout his entire life until he died in 2010 at Samhain. And I was chosen to head up the Church of All Worlds side of it and go public. So I did that in Labor Day weekend of 1967. And I came out with the Church of All Worlds. Lance and I were always Kirk and Spock to each other, is really our relationship. I think I ran with the Kirk archetype pretty well. Anyway, we talked about our philosophy and our ideas, and a lot of people were really into it. And at one of the very first public gatherings that I did this, somebody asked the fateful question. They said, what kind of religion is this? Are you guys some kind of Christian sect? Are you one of these Eastern things? Because funny religions were coming out of the woodwork back then, We had the Krishna people and various guru cults and all that kind of stuff. They were just popping out everywhere. We didn't fit in with any of those. But with all of the mythology and the ancient traditions and customs that I was filled with, I said, well, I guess you could say we're pagans. Nobody ever claimed to be pagans. Pagans was always somebody else. People talked about those pagans, but nobody said us pagans until I did. And then I would hear about, we then proceeded to incorporate the Church of All Worlds as the first pagan church. and we got our incorporation at the beginning of March of 1968, and a big place for a temple, and we were quite public at that time. It was, and I would hear about there's some other groups somewhere on college campuses. Generally, here'd be some bunch of kids over at Carleton College that were getting into Druidry, and there'd be someplace else where they were doing, Greek stuff, or there would be a Latin club somewhere that would be doing Roman things, in Egyptian, and people were coming up like that with, it's almost always college campuses study groups. So I would contact these people. By that, which you may have heard of, it became quite famous over the years. It's still going on, Green Egg, by the way. It's the longest running magical periodical ever published for 56 years. It's been online for the last 20 years, so you can still look it up on Green Egg online. And I'm really very proud of it, actually. Won all kinds of awards and got a lot of attention. Did a lot of good stuff. So I would send them our newsletter. I'd say, you guys sound like pagans. And well, we're pagans, so why don't we all be pagans together? La-di-da. And they would get back to me and they'd say, well, yeah, pagans, that's what we are. We're all pagans. And that was a huge thing. And I've often thought about how that compared with but Benjamin Franklin's greatest invention, and he said Americans, because he was the guy who coined the term American and got people to think of themselves as Americans, because up to that point, people were New Yorkers or Virginians or Protestants or Puritans or English or German or something else, but there was nothing that united them. And Benjamin Franklin said, well, we're all Americans. And everybody said, yeah, but that made possible an American Revolution, which could not have happened if it wasn't a common term. And I feel that that's what my contribution with pagans, when it's got a bunch of people to identify as the same thing, while still maintaining their individuality and autonomy as being Greek or Egyptian or Celtic or Norse or whatever else, but there was a common thing that we were all part of. Right. And that made possible the pagan movement that we have been enjoying for the last 50-some years. So there's my background story.
And that's a magnificent background story. You are one of the forefathers of the modern pagan movement. You have done so much, from your work with the community to your work with the church and with other churches to your other crazy antics, from raising unicorns to Grey School of Wizardry. We'd love to hear more about some of those things and your work with Second Life in developing and outreaching across the world in a more virtual environment. So tell us some about that, and what are you doing now, your travels, and what are you doing these days?
I'm really happy to talk about that stuff because I feel very proud of the work I've done. In the Church of All Worlds, we have a 9-circle system of progression from the outer to the inner. And the primary criterion for achieving the 9th circle, the innermost circle, is to make a significant dent in the dominant paradigm. And there's only a few of us who actually reach that point. And, my dent in the dominant paradigm has been paganism and also Gaia, the Gaia thesis, which I'm very proud to have put out there. I'm sure many of you are familiar with my image of the Millennial Gaia. And
yes,
that's been huge, really, all over the place. The idea that the entire planet is a single living organism and that Mother Earth. Wonderful. Well, I'm just delighted that she's caught on so well, and she continues to be. Every store you go into that has statuary has her. And then really, we now have her in 4 sizes. I had to wait a long time before the technology made that possible for 3D scanning and 3D printing and all that kind of stuff. But now, from little tiny ones to great big garden size, almost life size.
Yeah.
So that was a big one. And that came out in 1970. And then other people got on that one, and it became quite the thing. The Gaia hypothesis, or Gaia thesis, as I like to say it, has become a very major factor in the world, and I originated it. And then unicorns, of course, you asked about that. And that was 1980, 10 years later. And we were researching for a book. Let's see, I have the book here. Let's see here. Yeah. Morning Glory and I were decided that we were, fascinated by mythology and ancient legends and beasties and stuff. So we thought it'd be really cool to write a book on mythical creatures. And so we started doing research. And this was the book, which we did eventually publish, The Wizard's Bestiary.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a really cool book. I'm very proud of it. It's got like 1,500 illustrations of everything you can possibly imagine. And in the process of our research, we discovered the secret of the unicorn, that unicorns were actually real animals that really existed, and they were created by a process of animal husbandry. There was a secret thing that was, discovered and lost and rediscovered several times throughout history. And we were the ones who rediscovered it this time around. And we said, wow, that's pretty cool. That'll make a great chapter in the book, which it is. But we said, we started talking to some people we knew, our friends, about it. Hey, look, we know how unicorns were created. We could do that. And one of our friends said, well, I just got some land up in the Misty Mountains of Northern California, and I need somebody up there to be caretakers of the land. Why don't you and Morning Glory move up there and take care of the place and raise unicorns? Haha. And we did. That's exactly what we did. And the first unicorns were born in the spring of 1980, and it became huge, absolutely huge. After several years of exhibiting our unicorns at Renaissance fairs all over the country, which seemed like a natural, and places like Marine World Africa USA, where it was a star. It was the star attraction everywhere. Big billboards, see the living unicorn along the freeway, everything. And eventually, we came to the attention of the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, and they arranged for a 4-year exhibition lease. And they made the unicorns the star of the greatest show on earth. And all these years later, they still say that this was the most successful and biggest, hottest animal attraction that they ever had in the entire history of the circus. So that was all pretty cool. And all the years later, the world is completely forgotten. It's like, there are people like yourself who saw them and say, I saw the unicorn. But other people, unicorns don't exist.
Well, we know better.
I do remember seeing them at the circus, and I was absolutely fascinated as a child to see the unicorns.
So the Grey School, you asked about the Grey School. Well,
yes.
Yeah.
Oops.
I'm really very proud of that. That was a really great thing. And it definitely was another little contribution to making a dent in the dominant paradigm, bringing living unicorns back to the world. Well, it was a touch of magic. And the world, I think, needed that. That was kind of part of our mission, is to bring magic back into the world, and return the old gods and all that kind of stuff. That's a major part of what the pagan mission is. And that was a pretty good magic.
Yeah, very much.
It was. It made a huge difference to people. But that was a while ago. We haven't been doing that in a long time. Yeah.
It's a lot of work, I'm sure.
But you asked about the Grey School of Wizardry, and that's another
tell
one.
us about that.
Oh, yeah, it is. I hope some. Okay. Well, the Grey School, yes. Well, about 25 years ago, I was asked to write a book, and I had never written a book. I published a magazine for most of my life. I even published newsletters when I was in high school, even. So I've always done that, but I'd never written a book. But I was at New Age in 2000, I guess it was. And we had our booth, and we were selling our statues. I'd done a couple of dozen goddess statues, the the Gaia figure you just saw was the last one of those, but I've done quite a few others of all the gods and goddesses for altar figures, and we had them at our booth, and we were selling them to stores. And Trish Telesco came up, and she had just written another book, and she was there with the publisher to promote her latest book. And she had at that time written, I don't know, 60 some books. I don't think she herself knew how many, because it's a lot of books. She's quite prolific, and they're really good books. I highly recommend anything by Trish. She does, and they're all really good. So she said, well, when are you going to write a book? And I said, oh, Trish, I don't have time to write books. I'm making statues. I'm publishing a magazine. I'm doing all this stuff. And she said, oh, you know, I don't want to hear any excuses. Let me introduce you to my publisher. So she took me across the room to where the New Page Books publisher was, and introduced me to their acquisitions editor, and said nice things about me. Said, oh, you really got to get this guy to write books for you. So she said, well, have a seat and tell me, if you're going to write a book for us, what will... And I hadn't thought of that, but the Harry Potter thing was really big at that time. It was just totally taking off. And I said, lots of kids who are going to be turned on to the idea of magical studies and wizardry, and where are they going to go for that? You know, I'd like to write a textbook that would be the real thing, a textbook for a school, not just a fantasy one. So it would have to be a textbook of the real stuff. And so I started going off on that. So I got like a Boy Scout handbook for wizards. And she said, that sounds great. Send us a proposal. Did, and they accepted it. And I was kind of, wow, now I've got to do this thing. I got to deliver. I committed myself. So I reached out to the community and kind of formed sages and wise ones you get in stories all the time. And I reached out to all these amazing people that I knew because I've been publishing. And I gave them this, we would all wish we could have gotten a hold of when we started on the path. And the book that we want to get for our 11th birthday, Grimoire of Magic for the next generation of the new age and all that stuff. And they said, great. So everybody joined in, and the Grimoire for the Apprentice Wizard. And it actually arrived, the box of the first editions arrived on my doorstep on the 1st of February, on Bridget's Day, which was very appropriate, I thought. And but now I'm going to have to create the school because there wasn't one. And there were schools of witchcraft, but I wasn't trying to promote witchcraft specifically. Yes, I am actually a third-degree witch and all that stuff, but that's not the point. Wizardry is not a religion, you know. Wizardry is a vocation. Being a wizard is like being a doctor or a professor or something, you know. It's aside from your religion, you can be a wise one, and every culture has wizards. You know, the wise ones, the people who are the advisors and counselors and teachers and mentors and all that stuff. I mean, the way the wizards are depicted in all the movies and stories is basically, yeah, that's what we are. That's what we do. The modern analog is really professors. So then I had to create a school. So I set myself to doing that. And that was quite a story in itself. But the school opened its virtual doors at Lunasad, the 1st of August of 2004. And I expected we would have a whole flood of teenagers. I was not at all prepared for the whole flood of adults. About 3/4 of the people wanting to sign up were adults. And they said, you know, I wish I could have gotten into a school like this when I was younger, but it wasn't around. And now that it's here, I'm going to join it, by damn. So we immediately had to reconfigure our programs and our offerings and our everything for an adult audience. And today, the school is almost entirely adults. And we've gone from what was originally a high school curriculum to a university curriculum with over 700 classes in 16 departments, and a virtual campus on Second Life and a physical campus.
Wow.
With, classrooms in Whitehall, New York. And it's just totally taken 21 years old, the Grey School is. So it's old enough to vote.
And I hear wonderful things.
A couple of years ago, I was very pleased to be able to pass. Yes, well, I was able to pass on the mantle of headmaster to my protege and apprentice, Nicholas Kingsley, who is now the headmaster and running the school just beautifully, and has done amazing wonders in our virtual campus on Second Life, so much that it's won awards. And the people from the Second Life organization actually go there to study how to do this and how to use this as a teaching tool. So it's really quite cool. I'm very, very happy with it.
Excellent.
Amazing.
Oberon, you talked about the Gaia hypothesis, and I know that Gwen and Davron probably feel the same way, but that has really influenced my own devotional practice and my own belief system. And I find it interesting as a master herbalist when I go to herbalism conferences, as well as mycology for the study of mushrooms, that there are college professors talking about the Gaia hypothesis and how it influences their own studies of herbal medicine, as well as mushrooms and the mycelium and how they contribute to that. And I have to say that that's a beautiful thing.
It really is. Oberon has coined many things.
It is really crucial. I think that the neural network of Gaia.
It's quite true.
We're all part of it. But you've coined so many things.
Well, finally, after 50 years, I finally published the book, the Gaia book.
Yeah. I'll shut up. Talking doesn't work. Just delays.
Well,
Oberon, your personal reflections as well.
There's a delay.
There is a delay, so I'm just going to let Oberon.
History's Mysteries. All right. I happen to have a copy of that right here. This is one of my most recent books, History's Mysteries. And, well, I've always been fascinated by the unusual stuff, the myths and the legends, as I mentioned, about unicorns or mythology. I've always been fascinated by that. And there's all these stories that kind of float down through the ages of ancient things, Atlantis and the Amazons and Robin Hood and King Arthur and lost lands and civilizations and all that kind of stuff. And I've kind of collected that kind of stuff and collected stories on it. And finally, after many years of my collection got big enough to make a book out of it. And so I approached Nicholas, my protege, Nicholas Kingsley at the Grey School, and said, "You're interested in this stuff too," because we'd had many great conversations sitting around the fire, and passing the pipe and talking about mysteries and stuff. And I said, "Why don't we work together on a book on all this stuff?" So we did, and we spent about a year, I guess, compiling all the stories that I'd collected, and he wrote a few of them, and I drew maps for all the places because I wanted to show where things happened and timelines and all kinds of stuff. And again, like my other books, it's profusely illustrated. I mean, just with everything.
Very nice.
I design books pretty much the way I designed a magazine. My experience doing a magazine kind of prepared. So my books are not just text like other books. They're profusely illustrated and laid out with all the graphics interface, which I enjoy doing. So we did that, and it's been very popular. Histories, mysteries, turning points that changed our world, and you can find a lot of stuff in it. The thing about it now, though, is that I keep collecting more stories, and I'm thinking that we're going to have to put out a sequel or maybe a whole series on histories, mysteries, because we have so many.
We'll have to get you doing one of those History Channel
So yes,
shows.
if people have questions in the chat, that really helps to put them up, and then I can address them.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. How do tradition, storytelling, and myths affect things? Well, the thing is that we are storytellers. This is our primary human quality. This is the most important thing about being human. Our very first magic was fire. The first thing that we created that was utterly magical and set us apart from all other critters ever. And when we had fire, we sat around the fire and started telling stories. So what did you do today? And some people would say, oh, well, today we went out and hunted a cave bear, and we went into the cave, and Og got up on top of the cave with a big rock to throw down on it, and Grunt, got way later to stab it with a spear, and he did all. And by this time, you're standing up and you're dancing around and you're telling the story and you're enacting the whole thing, and somebody picks up a couple sticks and starts beating on a log, and you get a little drumming going on, and somebody's banging rocks together, and maybe somebody starts chanting a little bit, and before long, you've got the beginnings of magic and ritual and theater, all coming from sitting around the fire and telling stories. I love that. It's what makes us human.
Absolutely.
But it's not just that we are tellers of tales. We are beings of story, beings of myth. I mean, think about the people of ancient times that still live on in the stories we tell. And we keep telling new versions of the stories. How many versions of the stories of Robin Hood or Hercules or Jason and the Argonauts or King Arthur, and all the Knights of the Round Table, all these stories, they go on. And these people live. They stay with us because, in our tradition, at funerals, we always say, what is remembered lives. Well, that is true. That is true. And we live through the stories. This is what is passed on. There's an old saying that you die twice. Once when your physical body dies, but the last time you die is when the last person who remembers you says your name. And we don't have to. This gives us immortality. Stories give us a true immortality. So the idea then is to live so fully and so something about as it goes on down the line. And I certainly hope that, hundreds of years from now, people will be telling stories about me, because then I'll be there. I'll be right there, alive again.
I don't think you have to worry about that at all. You'll be remembered for millennia.
Well, good. Oh, well, I hope so. And I hope we all get to do that, because all you got to do is live a really great, storyful life, have adventures, do cool things. My favorite book, I think, the GaeaGenesis book, which I don't have my copy right here right now, but all of my books are on Amazon, so just go there. Is certainly my most important one, and I took a long time putting that together. But my favorite one, as far as fun to write and all that, was, it has to be, and it's in doing all the artwork for it, and putting it all together. That was a lot of fun. The book, because I write the kind of books that I want to have. I mean, I read lots of books. I've read, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of books probably. I read probably about a book a week on the average. So in a given year, I'll probably read about 50 books. And I've been doing that for a long time because I'm like 82 now, and I've started pretty early. But sometimes there's stuff that I really am interested in, and nobody's written the book that I like the best. So then I have to write it. I take it as an assignment. The way I live my life a lot, here's a clue for you, is I get these mysterious phone calls on a metaphorical astral, accept it, and then I'll get this crazy assignment to do some crazy ass thing. And the first times that happened, I would say, wait a minute, why me? But I've learned not to bother asking that question. And you just got to take it, okay, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? Because you have to take the assignment. See, this is the trick. If you say, no, I think I'll sit this one out, well, the gods aren't interested, so your show. And I'm enjoying my show. I want to keep on going, because if you keep on having great adventures, you keep getting better assignments. They come, oh, yeah, really? Well, he did that one. Let's give him another one, here's a really crazy thing let's give him to do. How about raising unicorns? Or traveling to the South Pacific and diving for mermaids, or something like that. So I rather like the assignments that the gods give me, and I hope I can keep on delivering and entertaining them. How do I compare paganism now to when I first started? Well, was just, people would meet together all in secret in somebody's living room. It was kind of based initially, all of the different groups, on the model of the secret societies,
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, most of the pagans in the early days didn't include their kids. I think, in fact, I know, because I've asked around, when the Church of All Worlds was already a going thing, was the first kid to be raised in a pagan family. Because none of the rest of the families were including their kids. Now everybody does. Now you go to a festival and there's kids all over the place, which is one of the oldest festivals. Starwood and Selena Fox's Pagan Spirit Gathering are the two longest running pagan festivals, about 45 years. And I've been attending those for over 40 years. Well, not Starhawk's one, but Starwood I've gone every year. And in that time, I've seen 3 generations. When I first started, people were there with little babies, and then those babies grew up, and then they were adults, and then they had babies of their own. And now those babies are grown up and are coming to the things. And it's a wonderful thing. And it has grown and spread to become a true community and a true religion on a major scale. And some people feel concerned that there is the inevitable diffusion at the edges, where we've got lots of people coming in who who don't know the history. They don't know who the elders are even. I've run into younger people who don't even know who I am, which is amusing. And but that's what you get when a religion is successful. In Christianity, you've got lots and lots of people who claim to be Christians, and they never go to church, and they've never read the Bible, and they don't do any of the stuff, but they still identify with that, and they pass it on. And that's where we're at now with that. And I think that's fine. It's as it should be. It's become a full-fledged religion. So that's how it's changed the most. Our biggest current challenges, well, right now, the big challenge is the presidential situation now. We have now got the Christian nationalism is now in the ascent. I highly recommend everybody who watches this to watch a film called Bad Faith. It's like on Netflix. It's easy to find. Bad Faith. It's all about the rise of Christian nationalism and their agenda to turn this country into a theocracy, a fundamental, as a law of the land. And if you've ever read that stuff, you should read Leviticus, read Deuteronomy. It's scary stuff. And the idea that people want to have a country in this, but it isn't even the majority. the majority of the people in this country do not, in fact, identify as Christian. The number of people who answer the surveys and say they're Christian is like 47% now. It's not even half. But they want to take over. That's their agenda. They want to rule the world. And in every story, you know who the villains are, because the villains are the ones who want to rule the world. So, there you go. There's your clue. So, yeah, right now I'm working with a coalition of pagan leaders, which is growing, to meet and address what we can do about this, to meet the anticipated threats. So far, we haven't been directly targeted. We've been mostly under the radar. But they know we're there. They know we're here. And when they get strong enough and have gotten rid of other people, I mean, these are fundamentalist monotheists, and they cannot tolerate anybody who isn't them. Anybody who isn't them has got to go. So I'm working with that.
Oberon, you on your blog, which is part of your website, which I'll put the link up.
What else
you wrote a blog about making the world safe, which ties into that mission of you working with the elders to protect us. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I'm going to go to the chat.
Indeed, I can. I mentioned to you at the beginning of this that I started this off in 1962, forming a water brotherhood we call Adel, that eventually branched into two branches, the relationship with each other throughout this whole thing, but had a separate approach. Ours was CAW was public, and the Association for the Tree of Life was not. And both had very important missions to accomplish. So the ATL's work was environmental activism and such. Anyway, our first mission statement, when we got together, is our mission. And our first mission statement was to make the world safe for people like us. And I've kind of followed that my whole life, too. My personal mission statement, when I first went off to college, in one of the very first classes, the teacher said, well, I'd like everybody in this class to think about it and write a personal life mission statement for yourself. And I did that, and I've stuck with this one my whole life, too. This is my own life mission, and it is, I quote, to be a catalyst for the coalescence of consciousness. Nice and simple alliteration. That's it. That's my mission. To be a catalyst for the coalescence of consciousness. And in the process, to try to make the world safe for people like us, which it is not at the moment. And so there's work to be done. And so all the stuff I've done has been a part of that, creating a pagan movement and fostering it and doing the work with Green Egg and the work with groups. I founded the first, or co-founded, I didn't do the single founding, I co-founded the first two pagan councils, the Council of Themis and the Council of Earth Religions. And I've been involved in many others ever since then. I was one of the founding members of the Covenant of the Goddess, for example, and have worked with a lot of the world and talk about this stuff. I attend conferences and do workshops and interviews like this one and all that. Not to convert people. I'm not trying to do that really. But one of the things that's important along those lines is to let our people know that you're not alone. That was a major motivation for deciding to go public with the Church of All Worlds. We, most of us had grown up as kids and we felt isolated. We were like the weird ones. We were the ugly ducklings. We were the changelings. Island of misfit toys, it was huge. When Lance and I first found each other, oh, there's somebody else like me. Wow. And so we said, there's got to be lots of us out there who are alone and isolated. And we need to flow the flag up the flagpole and say, hey, You know, you may be one of us. Come on over here. You may not be an ugly duckling. You may be a swan. And that has been huge. And as Margot Adler noted in Drawing Down the Moon, this is how I always felt. I just didn't know there was anybody else. And when they come to their first pagan festival, and every pagan festival will generally have a thing somewhere where they'll say, so how many of you are new? How many of this is your first festival? Or how many are new to paganism? And very frequently, a third to a half of the people will say, yeah, I'm new here. And people always say the same thing. They say, I feel like I've come home. And we get to say those beautiful, beautiful words. I think these are the most beautiful words you say, come home. And now almost every festival has a big sign up over the registration area, over the entrance that says, welcome home. Because that's what it is. It's a homecoming for us.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the books I wrote was stories of people telling their stories of how they came here. And many of them were Christian clergy. So I collected their stories. And the book is called Goodbye, Jesus. And I had the title for 20 years before I had the book, because that was the idea. The difference between witchcraft and wizardry, well, that's easy. Witchcraft is a craft. It's the practice of its shamanism. It's the European shamanism, essentially. It's being the medicine person, the person who is the healer, the herbal magic worker, the counselor, the person you go to when you've got problems, especially for women. And that's their job. It's usually in the traditional way. There would be the village witch, but it would be a craft, like the village blacksmith and the village harness maker and the village cooper and the village brewer. Everybody had a role, and it was a craft. Wizardry is not a craft. It's a position, I guess, a vocation. As I said before, being a wizard is like being a professor. You are the person that people come to. You know stuff, and people come to you for advice and counsel. The primary job of the wizards in most of the stories, whether it's Merlin and Arthur or Gandalf and and Frodo or Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker, the primary job has been the mentor of the young heroes. And that's the primary thing to do, because somebody has to do it. See, because the wizards, when you really come into it to that point, it means that you have probably lived through one of these 60-year Renaissance cycles, in my case, the 1960s. And so if you're still around and you were there, you're in a good position to have to counsel and mentor people through the next one, because now we're going through the next of these cycles. And they all have a name. The very first one was the Italian Renaissance of the 1480s. And the next one was the Reformation and the Age of Discovery in the 1540s. And then it was the Golden Age, the English Renaissance of the 1600s. And then the Scientific Revolution of the 1660s. And then the Great Awakening of the 1720s. And the Age of Reason and the French and American Revolutions of the 1780s. And the Transcendentalist Awakening of the 1840s. And the dawn of the magicians of the turn of the century. And of course, the New Age and the psychedelic revolution of the 1960s. And now it's the awakening, the age of the awakening. And that's the theme. In fact, and then we see it mysteriously showing up in things like wokeness, or big themes like the main theme at this last year's Parliament of World Religions was awake. This is your wake-up call. So that's kind of what it's about. It's a difference. Work together, and often both. Most wizards are also witches, but not necessarily. There's Christian witches. There's Buddhist wizards, Christian wizards, and Buddhist wizards, and Hindu wizards and Chinese wizards. You know, they call them sages maybe in different places, or mages. And
Yeah.
it's thank you. Yes. So that's what it is, and it's much more universal and on a different scale. Witchcraft is a very focused. Witches deal with the immediate in front of them, you know, working with people, doing healing and spell work and magic and rituals and worship and all that stuff. It's a religion and a craft. It's both. Wizardry is not a religion, although craft has a lot to do with it. Most wizards are pretty crafty. All righty. Well, I will do that. Good. Well, for all of you, you know, keep exploring, maintain curiosity, explore everything, study everything, learn from everybody. Everybody is a teacher if you learn from them. You know, go out into the world with joy and excitement and you know, in eagerness. And you know, the best blessing I can think of, and that mission statement, I will, I'm sure you all know, is to explore strange new worlds, seek out before. And the blessing that goes with that is live long and prosper.
Live
Blessed.
long and prosper. Blessed being. Excellent. It has been an absolute pleasure having this time to chat with you and to hear some of those stories and record them for history. You have been an inspiration to many of us, to generations of pagans, and will hopefully continue to be an inspiration for as long as your name remains on people's lips. And we think that that will be for at least a couple of ages to come. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of this wisdom with us. And it's been a pleasure connecting with you again. It's been a while. So thank you so much. Jim and Gwen, any parting thoughts?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Oberon, for being with us tonight so much.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for those who took time to watch this episode tonight. Be sure to follow Oberon on oberonzell.com.
Excellent.
Thank you. And one is glad to be of service. And thank you for having me.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.